James Edsberg is a banking analyst at the business research group Lighthouse Global. Good morning.
Good morning, Nick.
Now, if Northern Rock is able to get this taxpayer loan off its books by 2010, that's quite a commitment. Do you think it's realistic?
It's ambitious. Basically, what Ron Sandler, the new executive chairman of Northern Rock, has got to do is make Northern Rock, in business terms, boring and safe. All the things that you'd think as depositors we'd want in a bank. And in terms of its operating model, he's got to make sure that the assets, that is, the mortgages that it offers, only grow as fast as the deposits it can take. So put simply, he's got to build a business that isn't so reliant on funding mortgages through the wholesale money markets, which is where Northern Rock got into trouble in the first place. But we understand that they've begun to pay back some of the government's loan already, partly because, curiously, given that the government has guaranteed Northern Rock, and it's almost unique as a bank in having its operations guaranteed and its deposits guaranteed, money has been flowing into Northern Rock. And the more deposits it takes, the larger the stock that it has to manage, and therefore the more likely it is that it'll be able to pay this loan back to the government sooner.
Now, there's a lot of interest, certainly in the weekend papers and this morning's papers, about the payoff to Adam Applegarth. £760,000 is the rumoured figure, but apparently that's less than he's contractually obliged to. Do you think that will take some of the sting out of the situation?
I'm not sure. I mean, this is part of a wider debate about the risk and reward for executive talent and how we attract the best people to run large institutions like Northern Rock. And when things go wrong, what the contract says about how they should be paid off, or what happens when they resign. Of course, nobody looks at the details of this when the sun is shining, but when things don't go quite so well, they crawl all over it.
And apparently Adam Applegarth has a clause in his contract that if he finds work sooner rather than later, then the payoff will be less. A bit like the sort of England manager situation they had with Sven-Göran Eriksson.
Yes, that's right. If people are dissatisfied with this, they need to look to the remuneration committee at Northern Rock and the board that must have approved these terms, and ultimately the shareholders as well. I mean, all of this, there's no secret what a chief exec gets paid. I mean, it is all public information, and they're allowed to see it and approve it before that contract is put in place. The difficulty is you've got to still attract the right kind of good talent at the top of these businesses, and that may come with a price when things don't go so well.
Now, Northern Rock will also admit to £50 million in advisors' fees just to avoid nationalisation. That now looks like a colossal waste of money.
It does. I mean, there's a there's a debate for those who are very interested in the Northern Rock story about whether the government had to go through that process of attracting bids. But for those people who think that they did, in order to attract those kinds of bids, Northern Rock probably had to underwrite and pay off some of the advisors' fees. So probably sticks in the craw now that the business was ultimately nationalised, and the business has to swallow those costs.
And you mentioned earlier that lots of money coming into Northern Rock, but it's going to make a commitment not to top the Best Buy tables. Is that important, do you think?
Yes, it's if I was Ron Sandler, I'd been wanting to make the most of the fact that my status is as a bank that's backed by a government guarantee for as long as I could. But not surprisingly, the Building Societies Association and others, the EU, even Danish banks, and Northern Rock had some exposure to the Danish banking system, have complained that that is an unfair advantage in a very competitive market for financial products and savings accounts.
And yet it is still near the top of the Best Buy tables in some products.
That's right. If you look at some of the money comparison sites, and you'll see that some of its savings products are amongst the best on offer at the moment. Of course, it's nothing like the heydays of Northern Rock in terms of its mortgage offers and other products that it offered, because it had a reputation for being very innovative. IFAs, independent financial advisors, liked working for Northern Rock, and it was very popular at one point, accounting for a very large proportion of new mortgages made. But those heydays are over. They've now got to run it in a much more stable and conservative way.
Now, we know Northern Rock is nationalised, but there's still been a lot of disgruntlement from shareholders, particularly the institutions, the hedge funds that bought in when the bank got into trouble. Where will this morning's results leave them?
I think Ron Sandler has taken a very conservative view about his write-downs, i.e. the provisions he's making for the exposure that the business had to the subprime market in the United States, because their treasury operations were making investments and taking positions during the course of last year. So that's sort of interesting for them to absorb. But ultimately, this is a story which is beginning to move on in terms of the city. You know, there's no shares to buy in the business now. There are no bonds that are on offer. And yes, it's interesting for those people who are looking at the lessons to be learned in a regulatory point of view and, of course, political point of view. But in terms of the city, this moves on, although there is litigation. But I guess there was large amounts of money at stake.
James Edsberg from Lighthouse Global, thank you.